Greek literature told of Narcissus, the mythical son of a river god. It was prophesied over this extremely handsome Narcissus that he would have a long life and be very beneficial. There was, however, just one catch, and that one catch was that Narcissus was required never to look at himself. He could never catch a glimpse of himself. But one day, as Narcissus was bent down, taking a drink from the river, he saw in the water the reflection of these just handsome features, which was, of course, his own features. And after he saw that, the legend goes that he was never satisfied again. He could never actually do anything productive or get anything done that was worthwhile because he was constantly coming back to the reflection that he saw in the river. And he became obsessed with it, and though he tried to do greater things, he just couldn't because he kept being driven back to the river to see his own reflection. And psychologists have actually coined the phrase narcissism based on this legend. And that phrase narcissism, it is basically to describe somebody who is no longer able to look at life objectively, but they are actually caught up in the small world of self, and every decision that they make and everything they do is according to their own desires and their own wants, and their mindset is, what can I get out of this, or what will this do for me? How am I going to profit by it? And that's what it means to be a narcissism. And basically, one of the greatest downfalls for a leader is that he or she gets caught up in himself. And you can so easily get caught up in your own reflection that it's difficult to break free and to do the will of God. And Paul understood this, and that's why he began to tell Timothy, he said, "Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of believers in word and conversation." And he goes on, in charity and in spirit. And charity, basically, most of the time when you see the word charity in the Bible, it's describing love. And the love, he's saying, be an example in love. Your love will directly explain the feeling you have of yourself. It will be the example of what is going on in your own mind. The way you treat others is a response to the way you treat yourself and the way you act toward yourself. If you're so caught up in your own reflection, you're not going to treat others the same. That's just how it is. You're just not going to treat others the same. So what we're going to talk about in this video is love, charity, being an example in love and charity, and how this could hurt your ministry, and it also could help your ministry, and also your spirit. The way that you carry yourself, the way that you act towards yourself. You see, the problem and the issue for the young minister is that a lot of time when a young person begins to work in the ministry, they receive the anointing of God, and they receive the favor of God. And when you receive the favor of God and you receive this anointing in the Spirit of God, a certain amount of confidence will grow inside of you. And I've seen people who were as shy as could be, and but they started to get into the Spirit of God and feel the call of the ministry and begin to preach, and they completely outgrow themselves, and they no longer are this shy little quiet person, but now they are confident in what they do, and they are bold, and they are, they stand out among the crowd. And I've seen people who had no talent at all come into the church and begin to live for God, and out of nowhere it's like they start becoming talented all over the place, and start having all this stuff happening to them. And the reason for that is because you have the favor of God. God has blessed you with talents and favor and confidence. He's allowed you to have these things because these are essential for the ministry. However, when that begins to happen, there will become a separation between you and the other people. And there should be a separation. There should be a separation between the ministry and those who are not in the ministry. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't talk to each other, they can't congregate. In fact, you absolutely should find a way to congregate and fellowship and all that. But there will be a separation. The ministry should not be viewed as just like everyone else. And everyone else should not be viewed just like the ministry. There should be a complete separation there. But when there is a separation, it is easy for the young minister to grow overly confident in themselves and to start looking down on others because of it. And here's the fact of the matter. As the young minister is driven away, he must learn to love endlessly despite his seclusion. He needs to learn how to give himself fully, even though maybe he doesn't connect the same way or he doesn't fit in the same way. He needs to never stopping to try to connect and to try to fellowship and to try to love. I have seen some of the great ministers. I've seen many great ministers who have got the confidence and the boldness and the favor of God turn into bullies. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. Turn into bullies. And it's because you have that confidence and that favor, and you haven't yet learned how to control yourself and how to make a separation there. But it's so easy to become a bully. Most of the time, preachers and ministers, when they get into this, they can become just very confident and very competitive in themselves. So they begin to compete with others, and no one really can compare most of the time with the minister. And you turn into somebody who you don't even realize a lot of times. I know because I've done it myself. Where you joke around with people and you don't realize as you're joking with them that you're actually becoming a vocal bully in their lives. Because really there's a fine line, and you need to realize there's a fine line between joking and bullying. There's a fine line there. I love, and most of you know that I love to joke and be sarcastic, and my greatest friends know that I'm constantly joking and laughing, and I love to laugh. I love to joke. And my youth group knows that I am very, very silly, and I joke around and I laugh a lot with them. But I have also caught myself joking too far and going too far and realizing that I'm not exercising wisdom when I'm joking around and having fun, but I'm actually poking fun at the expense of other people, and this will hurt your ministry. People will lose respect for you. I know that there's a person in my youth group who I used to, before I got in church, I used to mess with so bad. And there's some people who, even when you become preachers and ministers and everything, it becomes difficult for you to not to joke around and play around, especially when other people are doing it. You just want to join in on the fun and joke around, and you can easily excuse yourself and say, well, we're just playing and having fun and all that. But are they viewing it that way? They may be laughing, but that doesn't mean they're not losing respect for you. They may be having a good time, or at least look like it, but that doesn't mean that they aren't losing that view of you as a minister. You have to be so careful with that, especially with young people. If you're involved in youth ministry at all, you have to be aware of that and be careful with that. Because the thing is they don't have what you have. They don't have the favor of God. They don't have the confidence that you have. They don't have all these things. And it's your duty as a minister to help them get to that place. But how can you help someone get where you're at if you're not treating them with respect? Ephesians 4:1 says, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation wherewith you are called. Now you walk worthy of this. He's saying that you need to walk accordingly with your vocation, with your ministry. You need to walk worthy. Now, none of us are worthy. But he's saying, here are some things that you have to do if you're going to be used in this vocation or in the ministry. With all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Now, how many of us can say that is our place, that is our ministry, that we are completely endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace? Don't use somebody as a joke, and don't have fun at somebody else's expense, but be careful with that. And also, you're going to deal with people who, the other side of it, who are overly confident and don't have respect for you, and they don't have this respect of you as a minister. And they're going to, I've had people speak out against me openly. I've had people lie about me openly and say that I did something that I never did. And I've had people lose respect for me because other people were talking about me. But in spite of all of that, it is never a minister's place to lash out, get upset, and go and talk bad about them. You have to love despite their rebuking and despite their rebellion, and despite all that, you have to love. There is no place in the ministry for someone to be upset and to lash out. You have to love endlessly. You have to esteem them greater than yourself, and that's difficult because some people they don't deserve it a lot of times. But you have to treat them that way. You have to treat them with greater love and greater respect than you would yourself. No greater love than this, that a man should lay down his life for his friends. That means that basically you take their life and you make it more important than your own. You consider it their duty to be alive, and they have a greater purpose to be alive than you yourself. You have to begin to view them in this light. If you put your own needs in front of others, then and you can't help but to put your own needs in front of the needs of other people, then you're in the wrong ministry. You're in the wrong business. You need to get out of this business. This business is about serving. The ministry is about serving other people. And if you can't serve, then you're in the wrong. The first sermon I preached was called "Why Not Now?" And I remember it like it was yesterday. I preached this sermon, and people came to the altar, and God blessed us. But I remember after that sermon, I cried and I wept before God more than anybody else in that entire place, because I had this sense, this feeling like this is it. This is what I've been looking for. This was a God thing. This was God moving inside me. This was it. I had found it. I had found my life's purpose. I had this intense feeling like that. I also, however, remember the second time that I preached, and it was about a month or two after that, and I preached a sermon called "Get Off the Floor, You Dog, and Let's Party." Yes, I was listening and reading to a lot of Jeff Arnold at the time, and but I had built myself up after the first time preaching. I built myself up to be something, and I grew overly confident and overly prideful, and I remember hardly anybody came to the altar, and I tried my hardest to get something to happen, and I couldn't, and I remember ending that night weeping and crying before God more than anybody else in that place, because I had a feeling and a sense of, this is not right, this wasn't it, this isn't my life's purpose, this was a me thing, not a God thing, and I had a complete different response to this sermon than I did to anything else, because basically there's no room for pride in the ministry. There's absolutely no room for pride in the ministry. If you have pride in the ministry, you won't make it very far, because this isn't about a me thing. This is about a God thing. And in fact, the third sermon I preached about pride because I realized that I messed up that night. And so I preached about pride, and God moved again, and I was restored in the ministry. But you have to realize that you can't take yourself so seriously in this. You really can't. You've heard it said, don't take yourself so seriously, no one else does. That really is how the ministry is a lot of times. Now, you need to have confidence in yourself, and sometimes you're going to need to build yourself up because nobody else will. But you cannot become overly prideful. I remember a friend not too long ago coming to me and saying, he was really being used by God, really started preaching, stuff like that. He came to me and he was saying, look, Aaron, all these people are testifying at church and doing all this stuff. He said, but nobody's mentioning me, and nobody is talking about what I'm doing, and nobody's mentioning my ministry, nobody's giving me recognition for any of this stuff or anything. And I had a very good long conversation with him about basically you can't expect people to. People do not, most people now, some people are good-spirited, some people are great, but most people are not going to give anybody else recognition. Most people are not going to try to help you out in that way, and that's good, because we are not supposed to receive recognition, because we aren't even the ones doing this. This is God doing this. I cannot do anything without God. I cannot really help someone. It's only God who can really help someone. I can just be a servant to do it. So if anybody needs recognition, it's God who needs to get the recognition, not us. But I understand the need for recognition and the need to try to receive things. And I just like anyone else, I am puffed up and I feel good about myself when somebody gives me recognition or talks about me or says, something that said that I did a good job or something. And we all do it, but we have to keep our spirit in check, because we can go too far with that. Right now in the UPCI and in apostolic organizations, all that, it is in to be in the ministry. It's in to be a preacher and a minister. That's why you have so many people going to Bible colleges and all these different things. People who don't necessarily have a passion for the ministry. They just know that they need to be in the ministry, so they're gonna go and do what they need to do to be in the ministry. But the problem is, when you have that, is you remove where before not so many people were, endeavoring to be in the ministry, and it wasn't like a general mindset, okay, you get older, you become a preacher. But people in the past, they grew a level of respect for the ministry, and when they came into the ministry, it was, this is me doing what God wants me to do. We have fallen into a position where there's more people getting into the ministry just because that's what you do in the apostolic faith, and that's what you do in the organization, and that's what you're supposed to do, and not so much because they felt the call of God on their life, or that they want to do the will of God. And the problem is that when you get into this for recognition and for yourself and for just because this is what you do when you're into this, you start to desire this for yourself and desire recognition. And if you're desiring recognition, you're in the wrong business. Because again, it's not for me to be recognized. It's for God to be recognized. This is not about earthly gain. I am not trying to win people to myself and to my ministry. I'm trying to win people to God and to the pastor's ministry and to the church. And I'm trying to help them get to a place where they can become ministers. That's the minister's duty. It's not to gain an earthly gathering. It's to gain an heavenly gathering. So it is important for the young minister to rethink, and I challenge you right now as you're watching this video to begin to rethink your personal standards. Rethink your personal standards. You have to protect yourself from the disease of pride. For whatever, by any means, you have to protect yourself from the disease of pride. The minister should have way more standards than everybody else in the congregation. Everyone else. You should have way more standards, because you're going to be fought the worst, the devil's going to attack you the worst, and you're going to have to fight pride more than anyone else in the entire congregation. So the young minister has to have personal convictions. Now, this means you need to have personal convictions that go beyond the standards your pastor preaches on. I'm just going to tell you, the young minister, the minister in general, needs to have more standards than the congregation has standards. You have to. You have to, absolutely, because you have to protect yourself. And I'm going to talk about more of standards as far as dealing with, the opposite sex and all of that in later videos. But what I have to ask is what are your clothes saying about the kind of spirit you have? What is your attitude saying about the kind of spirit you have? This is why standards is so important, because you have to reflect a humble spirit. I have seen people lose respect and people not being able to preach elsewhere, and I've lost respect for people because I sense this a sense of pride, and not that they did anything majorly prideful, but I could sense it through the way that they carried themselves, the way that they dressed, the way that they acted, and people will lose respect for you because of this spirit. You need to check yourself. You need to ask yourself, how can I dress humbly, but also still elegant? When I was first getting into the ministry, I dressed in all plain clothes. It was my burden to dress with absolutely no style at all, because this was what I dealt with, and this was my problem, was pride. So I had to go to the extreme. Now, as I grew in the ministry, I slowly began to venture out and become to wear ties that I like, and shirts that I liked, and suits that I like, and shoes that I like, and all that, without it becoming a problem for me, and without it becoming a sin for me, and for me to puff my own self up and to fall in love with my own reflection. But if you can't, you need to go with all plain clothes. You need to go to the extreme with this. I remember hearing Lee Stone King talk about holiness, and he said, one time he was preaching, and he said back in the day when he was young, he said he was known for being the best dressed, the most well-dressed preacher and person around, and he said he took pride in his clothes. He said, but one time he was preaching, and as he was preaching, he caught a couple of girls staring down at his clothes. And he said he kept preaching, but he couldn't necessarily catch their attention, because they were so caught up in how good he looked in his clothes and his style that their attention was drawn toward him and not toward God. And now, if you see Lee Stone King, he doesn't in any way try to dress with style at all. And that's because he knows that there's a direct response when you have a spirit that reflects your own will, and a spirit. People will sense your spirit, and people will lose out on respect for you, and they will lose out, even if they keep respect for you and they continue to follow you and all that, they will lose out on their respect for God, and their attention will be drawn away from God onto yourself, and you have to be careful. There's been times when I had to check myself and knock myself down and put myself back into position, because I had to realize, look, I could get recognition for this. I could do this, and it would work. But if I don't do it, and I let somebody else do it, or I let this become a God thing, God could get the recognition for this, and somebody could find God, or somebody else's ministry could be built up. And I had to stop myself and say, look, Aaron, step back. This isn't your show. This isn't about you. It's not about my reflection. This is about a God thing. This is what God needs to do. So what I challenge you is to stop revisiting your reflection. Leave your reflection alone. Leave yourself behind. Pick up your cross daily. Submit yourself unto God and follow Him. God bless you.